Greetings, wayward souls. Welcome to the Dark Wisdom Podcast, where fear is instilled one story at a time. So, if you're feeling courageous, step inside and please, no blood on the floor.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself at home. I'd like to welcome you to the House of Shadows, where you get entertainment and dark wisdom. I'm your master of ceremonies and lore keeper for the month of October. I have gone by many names, but in this era, you can call me Thoth or Mr. T for short. No relation. Do you hear that? That is the sound of the night. It gets me so excited that I want to share some stories with you. Don't think you can be scared? Let's test that theory, shall we? Now, per my contract with Liquid, I have to make sure you learned something. But he didn't say how. Now, sit back in your chair, relax. Don't forget to tip your waitress and let us begin. I'm going to tell you 4 stories tonight, each with their own theme and, of course, horror. The first of 4 stories is called Antique Doll. Now, the Antique Doll is a scary story about a young girl who receives a strange gift on her birthday. On the morning of her birthday, Lucy's mother woke her up and told her a package had arrived in the mail and was addressed to her. The girl hurriedly unwrapped the gift and was horrified at what she found inside. It was the most disgusting old doll she had ever seen. It was completely bald and its skin was cracked and caked in dirt. The worst thing of all was its teeth. They were long, pointy, sharp, and beastly. It looked like animals' fangs. With a shiver, she took the doll and threw it in the corner. Her mother scolded her, telling her that someone had gone through a lot of trouble to send her this antique doll. Her mother told her she had better appreciate it. Now, Lucy tried to protest her mother, but she wouldn't listen. She forced the young girl to keep the doll. So, to put her mind at ease, Lucy stuffed the antique doll into a little cupboard under the stairs, behind a pile of shoes where she wouldn't have to look at the ugly, evil little thing. It was not until a few nights later, when Lucy was lying in bed, that she heard a noise, a shuffling sound, which went on for about 5 minutes. Then a brief dragging noise, and finally a scuttling, like light footsteps walking very fast. By now, Lucy was shaking in her bed with fear, unable to move. Then she thought she heard a faint, raspy voice whispering quietly from the downstairs. Lucy always slept with the door open and the landing light on, as she was a little scared of the dark. She heard the voice say, "Lucy, I'm on the first step." And then loud scrabbling again, as whatever was speaking apparently turned tail and returned to its place of hiding. Lucy was so scared she didn't sleep a wink that night, but laid in fear until the break of dawn, when her mother got her up for school. Lucy tried to explain to her mother what had happened in the night before, but was so tired that when her mother passed it off as just a dream, she began to believe it might be the case. Of course, it wasn't. Lucy begged her parents to let her throw the doll away in the garbage, but they insisted that it was a present and she had to keep it. So Lucy reluctantly went back to bed, telling herself that it had only been a dream. She checked the cupboard under the stairs, but the doll was exactly where Lucy had left her. That night, Lucy fought sleep, but she eventually drifted off, even though she had fought sleep. Presently, the deep, disembodied voice woke Lucy again. She wondered if she could only hear it in her head. Lucy, I'm on the 4th step, it said. Then came to scuffling noise, and the voice didn't reoccur that night. Lucy was crying by now, and again she didn't sleep that night. At school, Lucy told her friends about the doll, and of course they laughed at her. Lucy could only think that if the doll was climbing 4 stairs at a time, then there was only one more night to go. That night, Lucy decided to shut her bedroom door. When her mother turned her light out, she asked why Lucy was no longer scared of the dark. Lucy replied that she was and could she leave her light on instead of the hall light. But her mother pointed out that her bedroom light was so bright it would keep her awake and said no. Therefore, Lucy agreed to just sleep without a light. She opened the bedroom curtains instead to light the room a little anyway. Just as she began to doze, she heard the noise. And then the voice came, very clear this time. Lucy, I'm on the top step. In the darkness of her bedroom, Lucy heard a click and trembled with fear. She wasn't sure, but she thought she could see her bedroom door opening very, very slowly. The next morning, Lucy's parents found her body at the bottom of the stairs. They guessed that she had been on her way to the toilet during the night and, in the darkness, had slipped and fallen down the stairs, breaking her neck. The antique doll was found beside her body and was buried with Lucy. Everyone said what a tragedy it was. She loved that doll, said her mother. Now they can be together forever. Remember, boys and girls, watch that first step. It's a real killer. Now, for our next story. The title of this story is called Clap, Clap. Now, this is a scary story about a man and a woman who get lost in the mountains and come across an old cabin. It should be very interesting. One day, a young married couple went hiking in the mountains. As the sun began to set, they realized they were lost. The wife was getting worried, but her husband tried to calm her down and assured her that they would eventually find their way back to their car. However, after walking for hours, they still had no idea where they were. It was growing dark, and the man and wife were getting desperate. They didn't have a map or a compass with them, and all of the trees looked the same. Just when they were about to give up hope, they came across an old cabin in the clearing. The cabin looked as if it had seen better days. It was dilapidated and seemed like it hadn't been used in a long time. Some of the windows were cracked and broken, and a lot of tiles had fallen off the roof. The husband knocked on the front door, but there was no response. He went and turned the handle. It slowly creaked open. Inside, they found it was in a bad state of disrepair. There was a very little furniture, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. As the couple cautiously looked around, they noticed a strange atmosphere and a peculiar musty smell. The walls were covered from floor to ceiling with graffiti. Written in red paint, the words death, 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 death were repeated over and over again. The man and woman were unnerved. With a shaking hand, the husband reached out to touch the wall. He was horrified to find that the paint was not yet dry. The couple were very frightened, but they had nowhere else to go. They knew that the mountain was dangerous at night, and there were lots of wild animals prowling the woods. Despite the creepy writing on the walls, they decided to stay the night. Going upstairs, they found a moth-eaten mattress that was covered in stains. The husband and wife wrapped themselves in an old piece of carpet to keep warm and tried to make themselves as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. They lay down together on the mattress and eventually managed to fall asleep. Sometime after midnight, the couple were awakened by a strange rustling noise. It sounded like someone or something was moving around outside the shack. Her husband listened for a while, but he didn't hear anything. He got out of bed and walked over to the window. It was too dark to see outside to see anything. Opening the window, he stuck his head out. "Who's there?" he called nervously. There was no answer. He was about to go back to bed when his wife said, "Maybe it's someone who can't speak." The husband returned to the window and said, "Is there anyone out there?" Clap once for yes and twice for no. He strained his ears to listen. The stars twinkled in the night sky. The crickets were chirping loudly. All of a sudden, he heard a loud. The man turned to his wife and said in surprise, "You were right. There's someone there." He leaned out the window and his eyes scanned the darkness. He couldn't make out anything in the pitch black. "Are you the owner of this cabin?" he asked. "Are you a man?" "Are you a woman then?" "Are you human?" A chill ran down his spine. He swallowed hard and croaked, "Did you come here alone?" "How many are with you?" Clap once for each person. If you're deadly and you know it, clap your hands. That story gets me every time. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Now, our next story is going to be a different variety than the first two. The title was called Gone Fishing. Now, Gone Fishing is a scary story about two boys who encounter a strange man down by the river in their small town. This morning, bright and early, my friend Oleg and I decided to go fishing. We live in a very small town and there is never much to do. We were dying of boredom. However, this morning it was even more quiet than usual. The streets were empty and there was nobody around. The town was eerily quiet. We went down an overgrown path that led to the river. When we got there, we saw a strange figure in a dark green hood crouching on the riverbank. He was holding a fishing rod in his hand. "Good morning," I called out. "Are the fish biting today?" The man didn't answer. He just gave a hoarse laugh and started to sway slightly from side to side. I went closer and asked again, "Are the fish biting?" I took 2 more steps and then stopped in my tracks. The man began to sway faster and faster. I couldn't see his face because it was obscured by the hood. Just then, I saw something that horrified me. At his feet, there was a human hand, severed at the wrist. I felt a chill run down my spine and I started to back away. The man slowly turned his head to face me. I saw a pair of piercing red eyes and sharp, dark yellow teeth. Instead of a nose, he just had 2 triangular holes. He stared directly at me and opened his mouth in a bloody grin. I turned and ran back to Oleg. Not knowing what I had seen, he looked at me in bewilderment. I glanced behind me. The man in the hood was standing up and coming towards us. Without waiting to see what would happen next, I grabbed Oleg by the hand and dragged him with me and shouted, "Run!" We rushed into the trees, looking back over our shoulders every 5 seconds to make sure the man wasn't following us. We sprinted through the undergrowth and made our way to the police station. On the way, I told Oleg in a trembling voice about the severed hand and the man's terrifying face. He was scared too. When we reached the police station, I pulled on the door handle, but it was locked. We both pounded on the glass, but there was no answer. "Listen, I'm going to see if I can get inside," I said. "You stay here and keep watch in case that crazy guy comes." Oleg was shaking and said, "But I'm scared. What am I going to do if he—" I didn't let him finish. I ran around the corner and found an open window at the back of the building. I climbed up through it and found myself in the bathroom at the police station. When I opened the door, I peered out and saw a dark corridor. The light was flickering ominously. Summoning all of my courage, I walked down the hallway and came into an office. The room was empty and there were papers and furniture strewn across the floor. The phone was broken into pieces and the desk had been overturned. Just then, I heard someone shouting. It was coming from the street and it sounded like Oleg. I was about to rush to the front door and let him in when I heard a rustling sound. Suddenly, another door in the corridor opened and I saw a figure lurking in the darkness. "Who's there?" I demanded. There was no response, but I saw 2 familiar red eyes peering at me from the darkness. I froze in horror. For a moment, I was so petrified that I could not move. The figure emerged from the darkness and stopped into the dim, flickering light. It was the same face I had seen at the river, but he was wearing different clothes. It was a policeman's uniform. Suddenly, the man came toward me at lightning speed. He covered a distance of 3 meters in less than a second and grabbed me by the throat with his strong, bony hands. The man stuck out his black tongue, licking his lips and gnashing his crooked teeth. As I watched in horror, his face started shifting and changing right before my eyes. Without thinking, I reached out and grabbed the first thing I could find. It was a pen. I raised it above my head and with all my might, I drove it into the man's neck. Bright red blood gushed from the wound and the man let out a high-pitched screech. His grip loosened on my neck and I managed to break free. I rushed down the hallway and yanked open the first door. I saw inside there was a pile of human flesh and gnawed bones. The sight made my stomach turn and a wave of nausea overcame me. I fell to my knees and retched up whatever was inside my stomach on the ground. I was shaking with fear. I realized that this was the remains of the other policeman. Just then, I remembered Oleg. He was waiting for me outside. I ran to the front door and opened it. When I saw the familiar face of Oleg on the other side, I wanted to cry. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "I heard you shouting." Oleg nodded. "Everything is fine," he said. "I thought I saw someone moving around inside. Let's go home before that crazy guy comes back." We ran all the way home, and when we reached Oleg's house, we found that his parents were not there. On the table, there was a note: "Gone to visit your grandmother. We'll be back late tonight." We went around the empty house, securing all the windows and locking all the doors. We were barricading ourselves inside. Oleg was surprisingly calm. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold anything. After we finished securing the house, I picked up the phone to try and get help. But there was no dial tone. We were cut off from the rest of the world. We sat down in the living room and turned on the TV. There was nothing on the news. Everything was going on as usual. Whatever was happening, it seemed to just be confined to our little town. I took out a pen and a sheet of paper and tried to write down exactly what happened to us. I don't know why, but somehow it made me feel better. If we don't make it through this, then at least someone will find this piece of paper and know what happened to us. Oleg is sitting beside me right now, but he is strangely pale. I asked him if he is okay, but he just shrugged his shoulders. Something is wrong. At any rate, Oleg got up and went to the bathroom, but as he got up, an object fell out of his back pocket. I was getting ready to call out to him and tell him he dropped something, but a wild fear seized me. Maybe it's just my paranoia going out of control, but I looked down on the floor and saw that the object was the pen from the police station, the same pen I used to get away from that scary man. This cannot be, flashed through my head. Trying to speak very loudly but calmly, I asked Oleg, "By the way, where's your sister? Did she go with your parents?" I heard his voice from the bathroom saying, "Probably." As the realization slowly sunk in, a cold wave of horror washed over me, and I put my head in my hands. I wanted to cry. Oleg doesn't have a sister. In the uneasy silence, I can hear the bathroom door opening, ominous creak. Well, goodness gracious, boys and girls. It seems Oleg wasn't what he seemed to be. He seems he was so mad he could krill someone. Okay, enough with the fish puns. Time to scale back. Now, this next story brings us to our conclusion for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed these stories, because I know I've enjoyed telling them to you. Now, this story is called Video Camera. Video Camera is a scary horror story about a young university student who comes to believe that he's being stalked. He leaves a camcorder in his room to act as a surveillance camera. A few years ago, there was a young man named Brian who went to university. He didn't have enough money to live in the campus accommodation, so he had to rent an apartment on his own in the city. After he had been living there alone for a while, he began to notice some strange things happening. Often, when he came back from college, the curtains in his bedroom would be drawn, when he distinctly remembered having left them open when he left that morning. At other times, some of his belongings seemed to have been moved and other possessions were nowhere to be found. These strange occurrences started to creep Brian out as the young man decided to talk to his friends about the situation. Trisha and Alex, his friends, met him at a local diner over coffee. He told them all about the strange things he had noticed. "Maybe I'm just being paranoid," said Brian, "but I just get this sneaking suspicion that someone is breaking into my apartment during the day while I'm at university And what?" interrupted Alex. "Rearranging your curtains and moving your stuff around? Who in their right mind would bother doing that?" "It sounds crazy, but you might have a stalker," said Trisha. "It's a possibility if it's true. I think the best thing to do is to contact the police. What can the police do? Said Alex. They're not going to spend their time keeping your apartment under surveillance. Besides, there's no damage to any of your things and no sign of a break in. In short, there's no evidence. So, what options then? Pleaded Brian. I can't just do nothing. I know how you can put your mind at ease, said Trisha. It's easy. Just get a video camera, set it up in your bedroom, and leave it running when you go to college. If you really do have a stalker, you can show the tape to the police as evidence. You know, that's a great idea, said Brian. And if you're really just paranoid and crazy, you can show the tape to your psychiatrist, joked Alex. That night, Brian borrowed Trisha's video camera and brought it home. The very next morning, he hid it discreetly under some folders on his desk before he went to college. He pressed the record button and left it running. During the day, while he sat taking notes and lectures and going across campus, the young man forgot all about the video camera. It was not until he arrived home and went into his bedroom that he remembered his plan. Taking the video camera out of his hiding place, he pressed the stop button. Then he took out his mobile phone and called his friend. Hey Trisha, he said, I just got home. I'm going to watch the video. Cool, said Trisha. Don't hang up. Tell me if you see anything. He pressed play and watched the recording on the video camera's tiny screen. He saw himself leaving for university in the morning and closing the bedroom door. Then there was nothing. He pressed fast forward and scanned through the video. The room was empty. Still nothing, he said. I can wait, replied Trisha. Anyway, there's nothing worth watching on TV at the moment. Oh my gosh, cried Brian as he pressed play on the camera. What? What? Trisha begged excitedly. The door's opening, said Brian. It's a woman. What's she doing? Asked Trisha. Just standing there, closing the door, walking around. Oh my gosh, so weird. What does she look like? Can't see her face. Long, black, stringy hair, tattered dress. Do you know her? No, don't recognize her at all. She's carrying a knife. A big kitchen knife. She's going through my trash. Now she's picking up my clothes and sniffing them. Ugh, gross. What's wrong with her? She's going over to the closet. She just got into the closet. Fast forward and see if she does anything else, said Trisha. Brian scanned through the video for a while, but the room was empty. You know what this means, said Brian. I have the evidence now. I can go get the police and they'll take me seriously. I know, said Trisha. They'll have to. Alex is totally going to freak when he sees this. No doubt. He didn't believe you, but I did. I know. You're a good friend. Oh my gosh. What? What? Said Trisha. Brian pressed play again. The door is opening again, said Brian. Who is it? Oh, it's okay, said Brian. It's just me coming home from college. He watched himself on the screen, shutting off his camera. Let's go to police now, said Trisha. I'll walk with you. We can show them the tape. Okay, I'll meet you at the diner in 15 minutes, said Brian, as he grabbed the video camera. Okay, wait a minute, said Trisha. You said she got into the closet. Did she ever leave? Brian, did she ever get out of the closet? A chill ran down Brian's spine. Behind him, he heard the closet door creak open. Brian, get out of there, screamed Trisha. But it was too late. The phone went dead. When she tried to call him again, there was no answer. Later that evening, the police found the body of an 18-year-old college student lying in a pool of blood. He had been stabbed 21 times. They barely recognized him. The video camera was clutched in his cold, dead hands. When the police examined the camera, they discovered that the memory card was missing. No trace of the woman was ever found. Right now, she could be hiding in your closet. It seems like the woman caught Brian in a dark room to see what developed. That's it for puns for me. Now, I hope you all enjoyed these lovely stories about terror, horror, fishing, and making sure to check your closets before you leave. Now, this is all the time we have. It seems my time is up here. But before I go, I know Liquid leaves you all with a beautiful anecdote about encouragement and uplifting. But I'll say this. When the sun goes down and the moon shines bright, it's hard not to think about what's out there in the darkness. Stare at the dark too long and you will eventually see the darkness staring back at you. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves, boys and girls.
Would you look at that? You survived the witching hour. If you feel inspired, come back with your soul intact anytime. In the meantime, you can catch Professor Liquid on Twitter at FormlessLiquid. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and many others for a frightening good time. Type in Liquid Wisdom Podcast and you may survive the night. I'll see you soon.